Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hi, everybody. This is Brett. Welcome back to the Online Great Books podcast. I am, of course, the producer, and I am here very quickly to present you part 2 in Scott and Karl's conversation with Malachy Walsh, the author of Socratic Scribbling. Make sure you caught part 1, and there is no overlap between part 1 and part 2. We start today with a brand new subject right where we left off. Last note, to learn more about Malachy, the book, or to get a copy of the book, Socratic Scribbling, you can go to socraticscribbling.com. And that's it. We'll get right to it. Thanks for listening. Here we go.
I heard Father Peter Gilchrist give a talk on preaching, which is rhetoric. It's that second kind of rhetoric, or maybe the third kind. But he'd say, so you got a Bible, you read the passage, you say, what does the story mean? What exactly does it mean? What did it mean to the people at the time? But then the third one, what does it mean to your audience? And you always have to leave with that. And it's not that you're making it up, but you have to, what does this congregation need to hear? What are these consumers? It's like those fishermen. What are they concerned about? And that's how you make good writing, is something that addresses the questions that they've already had. I think you go back to Socrates and Meno, probably the reason people think Socrates is an asshole in that dialogue is he's not going where Meno wants to go. He's dragging him. Let's talk about abstract forms of virtue. And Meno probably wanted to know how to use it in rhetoric. Tell me, can virtue be taught? What's his real question there? How can I make political speeches better?
Well, and you can understand why, because Meno was, as I recall, had slaves, because we have his slave boy. And then what's the other one who was just through chasing his slave? Is that the Protagoras, right? The Hippocrates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. He was exhausted from chasing his. But they're wealthy young men that have to be successful in the business of Athens. And that means they have to get up and pitch things that they want to do or that their allies want to do. And be political and form relationships with people for leverage.
Yeah, so you say, I'm just digging up a quote here.
Karl made 15 pages of notes.
Well, it's what I do, Scott. Using proofs and evidence can get us to the truth of things, but fact and logic alone cannot get us to the good of things. I put a star by that one. For the good or the bad is contingent on more than the facts of the case. The good depends on the nature and situation of the people involved. So facts and logic, syllogisms, they can get you to a set of true facts, maybe, but they can't get you to the good. And when you're doing the second type of writing, which is exhortation, you're talking about the good.
And you're in the world of ethics and virtue.
Yeah.
Right? And psychology and rhetoric and the politics. All those books are just like the Organon create a cluster. I think there is a cluster with the psychology and the ethics and the politics. And then, of course, the rhetoric and the poetics. For the use of language.
So for our folks who haven't read that, the Organon are the works on logic that Aristotle wrote.
Which includes the categories on interpretation, the prior analytics and the posterior analytics, I believe.
And maybe on ideas. Maybe, if depending on who you are. So Malachy, is Malachy posited that there is a psychological organon? Is that what I just heard?
I think he just did.
Yeah, I like that. Which is comprised of politics, ethics, rhetoric, poetics, and what else?
Yeah, because I think it's the relationship organon. Because it's not just psychology, but if I had two issues with Aristotle, it would be he's very thing-oriented. Substance is his thing, so to speak. as opposed to, and maybe I fall a little between Plato and Aristotle, more like Whitehead, event-oriented. I think we live not in a world of things, but everything I see isn't a thing. It's an event. It has a beginning, middle, and end. That's why plays have, before, now, and after, right? The tripod structure of a narrative has to deal with what happened before, what's going on now, and what's going to happen.
Okay, so
and that's where so that tripod occurs over and over again. And that leads you, we start with the Meno, back to the Meno. These are like, we're hardwired to think this way.
So you said two things you took issue with on Aristotle. One is he's things oriented, and you believe that, and you are more event oriented. What was the second one? Or was that two?
Well, or I'm going to take exception because he's also very activity oriented. Right? In other words, he looks at, we're either thinking, doing, or making. And I like him best when he's looking at, well, how do we, and I love the way when he says quibbling over words, Aristotle doesn't quibble. Well, some people use the word this way. In this situation, you use the word health that way. And he'll take you through his exhaustive list, but it's a really good list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I not that I understand Plato, but I damn sure didn't understand him until Aristotle told me about him in Metaphysics and Politics and ethics. He just tells you what everybody before him thought. And he just makes these lists. Well, and Xenophon says, and that's so useful. I love him for all that classifying and listing that he does. That's my favorite.
I don't trust him on Plato.
You don't?
Well, he's the interpreter of Plato that everyone reads and says he's one source on that.
Well, let's say Plato was like this kind of guy who thought these certain things that are now lost to us. Well, then he becomes what his writings say about him, which is almost nothing because he never says anything in the writings except maybe in the spurious letters. And then what Aristotle says. Then we've got a few like weird dialogues.
All right, but say if I write a bunch of dialogues that I publish and I don't work out the theory of forms in detail.
Right.
And then here comes Aristotle, punk kid, and he works out the theory of forms in detail only to trash it.
But is that what happened though? I mean, didn't Plato write all this Socrates stuff, and then they're walking around in the grove at the academy,
allegedly,
and he's telling Plato about it, just like all that secret esoteric stuff you talked to me about. And then when you die, and I write it all down, I mean, all of the Carlingian esoteric teachings.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting a little off topic, but so Plato's style of writing, if he leaves things unsaid, he's probably got a reason for leaving things unsaid. And then you come in afterwards and say them, and then fault him for things that he says when you're the one that constructed what he said. What you're saying, Scott?
Are you calling Aristotle a liar?
No, I love him too much, but I don't know.
No, for real. Do you not trust his account of Plato's forms and in the metaphysics that he puts in there? And what is it, book 1? You don't?
I think he elevates the forms into being much more important than I think Plato. I don't think Plato cares nearly as much about the forms as Aristotle cares about them.
That's probably true, but if you're Aristotle, don't you think it's important to explode the forms? I mean, like, maybe it's one of Plato's loosely held ideas that he like tossed out on Wednesday just before quitting time.
I think it's rhetoric. I think the forms are rhetoric. It's like people would say about our most recent president, that his friends take him seriously but not literally, and his enemies take him literally but not seriously. Something like that. Isn't that a chiasm that I just did?
Yes, it is. Chiasmus, yeah.
Plato might not have meant them to be taken as seriously, that it was, to encourage Meno to search for truth. That's when you talk about recollection, and then for someone else to come back, well, how does recollection really work?
For me, bringing the down to writing, for me, Plato, if you don't mind.
I like it that you keep bringing us back.
Yeah. But why I can never get rid of Plato, even though I love Aristotle's understanding of the power of the particular, is I think we love Aristotle because Aristotle kind of goes, look, this is the way things work. And if you don't, there are really 10 things you got to look at. And if you don't look at all 10 of them, you're going to screw up. I mean, Aristotle gives you wonderful, both practical and theoretic advice. This is the way I'm trying to describe the world and the way it works. And I think it's a wonderful enterprise.
Yep.
But what scares Aristotle is Plato's vision. Yeah, but life could be better. Life as it is, the polity now, the kind of government, do we just have to live with the way it is? And then if we get, how can we agree on what that ideal that we're striving for is? And that's, I think, why people will find Aristotle more practical, but Plato more inspiring.
That's well put.
Yeah, and it's what scares me about Plato, too. I mean, my dad says there's nothing worse than a hand-wringing do-gooder, and I think that there's nothing worse than like a utopian. Yeah,
I was just someone again in Slack wrote a bit where she was quoting apparently Kate Millett, one of the founders of Now and radical feminism, had a younger sister who describes how anti-family her Kate was. That basically they had an agenda to destroy the family. They felt family was creating repression against lesbianism and homosexuality and sex in general. Yeah. And it struck me, I couldn't help but think of the Republic there. We're going to raise the kids out of kibbutz. And you're not even going to know who your parents are. And Aristotle said, I think they'll still recognize each other. So that debate, Plato sparks, like, is it better? No, but my goodness, it's still such a powerful debate today that people have and feel so strongly about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you read the great books, you'll see everything has already been done before. You won't be surprised. I want to bring up some more practical bits from the book. The book is chock full, not of nuts, but chock full of...
What's the name of the book?
The book is Socratic Scribblings.
Oh, who's it by?
Socratic Scribbling. By Malachy Walsh with Katie King.
I'll be darned. Where could people get that?
They can get that at the Online Great Books website, I believe, where you can also buy T-shirts and maybe some other things.
Yeah.
And sign up for Online Great Books.
Yeah.
We would love to have you. And so there's wonderful little bits of wisdom in there. A traditional way of understanding, this is the Aristotelian way of understanding rhetoric, is ethos, logos, and pathos. You're creating a character when you write. I'm quoting from the book now. So when you're writing in persona. That's something to think about. I mean, I had to do some writing for that other company we work for, and I tried to get the right voice. It was like how to kill yourself with the bench press or how not to kill yourself with the bench press. And so I had to think what character I wanted to be.
Pathos rising.
I thought that was interesting to think of in terms of character, but also you had this thing from advertising. Because you have a character, you can only cheat once. You can only play a dirty trick once because no one will believe you after that.
Yeah. You can sell anything once with a lie.
So there's an ethics built into rhetoric, which I hadn't really thought of before. So that was insightful for me.
There's no trust. The marketing lingo they used to call building brand equity, where you trust Prudential, the rock, it's stable.
Rock.
Yeah, so if you're sitting there with the blank page and you want to write something, say, I want to explain Bitcoin or how to set up a stereo. In what character am I going to write this? What's the appropriate character in which to write it? Am I writing it for 15-year-olds? Who's my audience? I think these are all wonderful ways to break through the blank page.
If you were lucky enough to have a father explain to you how a carburetor is put together, that would be the voice that you wanted. Somebody who really showed you how to do something complicated. We get a lot of STEM people in online great books. So I get a lot of people that end up having to do technical writing. And I remember one said, well, I'm trying to explain this thing and it has, 67 steps. And I said, no, it doesn't. It has 3. Let's divide them. Let's group them. And the whole idea of collecting and sorting, and this is why I'm obsessed with index cards, is that you don't know what order things are going to occur to you, right? And what order you should, but the order by which you understand something isn't necessarily the best order by which to explain it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yes. Once you know their question. But the whole idea of collecting and grouping your ideas or what you want to communicate just makes all the difference in the world if you're right. And then you know what you want to say, and you don't get stuck with too many words, and you actually start finding verbs instead of saying is all the time or was.
You mentioned Twain on The Decay of the Art of Lying. I like the Enthi memes. I like memes. So you use memes as an example in this book of good rhetoric. So why? Why is it good?
In the rhetoric, Aristotle says when you're trying to make the case, right, that this is actually in the speech itself, he said, what can you use to persuade people on the logical side? He said, well, unless you're having a long, detailed philosophical discourse, the best way to do it is with an example or case history. Well, this is what happened to Sparta when they tried it, as opposed to this is what happened to Thebes when they did it. So you set things up with examples. So he said, and most people don't have the patience for 43 steps of logic to why you reached a conclusion. And he had this wonderful insight. He said, look, all advice that you're giving ultimately comes down to what for him would have been a Ben Franklin line: a stitch in time saves 9, right? Would be, we got to do it now or we're going to have to spend a lot more money later, right? Is the argument if you want somebody to spend somebody now, as opposed to too little, too late. So you have, and these are enthymemes which have that tripod logic kind of composed, and people hold them to be truths. Now, of course, for every a stitch in time saves 9, haste makes waste. There's the contradictory one. But nonetheless, you will be calling on one or the other side of that logic. And it helps people understand things quicker about what you're about.
Well, one of the things Aristotle talked about in the rhetoric, so the enthymeme is kind of, it's a syllogism with one of the premises unsaid.
Right. And it's basically any old saying.
Yeah. And what it does is there's a delight to the audience because you get to make the connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that you connected it with the modern meme culture.
Well, they have a picture. Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's the middle term. Yeah.
Yeah. The picture's the middle term. And so everybody loves memes, or at least, good-hearted people love memes, because you get to fill it in. You have the Abraham Lincoln one. Come to the theater, she said. It'll be fun, she said. You have to fill in the gaps and figure out why that made you chuckle. And, oh, yeah, he died in a theater. Yeah. But having that makes the audience or the reader an active participant in what you're trying to do.
Yes. It offers kind of the reassurance of it's kind of like why people like yoga or Tai Chi. Well, it's a 5,000-year-old idea. So there still must be some truth to it. And maybe it applies here.
Well, there's a lot to like in this book. I suggest our dear listeners go buy it. The next time I have to write anything, I'm going to flip to the back. I'm going to steal all your ideas. And
that's what they're there for.
Who am I writing it for? I've got an article in mind right now I'm thinking of doing for Barbell Logic. I think it'll be a lot better. Who am I writing it for? What's newsworthy about it? just sketching all of these details out, I think.
Well, and you also find good reasons to write in things that you care about. Say, well, there's nothing that inspires me to write right now. And then just think of, one of your barbell logic folks' questions they have, like, I'm old, I'm afraid of my balance. How do I overcome that fear? Well, here are 3 things to reassure you and 3 things that here are the 3 biggest worries, And then you can phrase it in the 3 things. Suddenly the ideas just pop into your head and you throw them on your index cards, shuffle them around, and then in the afternoon you've got a nice little piece.
Yeah, I think once you've asked all the questions and worked out all of that stuff, the writing is easy. Writing, it's the thinking that's hard. But having all of these prompts for the thinking is very helpful.
And writing is thinking for me. It's not so much that you have to think before you write as you use writing to help you think.
Yeah, I typically, when I write things, I don't write anything and people think I'm not working. So it'll be like 3 weeks and I haven't written a thing, but I've been thinking about it the whole time. And then when I finally sit down and write it, it's fast. People have different techniques for doing that, but I think going through these checklists and at least, even if you don't do the index cards, if you just read about the process that Malachy lays out, I think you're going to be thinking more clearly, even if index cards aren't your thing.
Just the insight that the blank page syndrome is really because you don't know how to do the pre-thinking. I mean, that's key. You're like, the teacher says, write the essay on what I did this summer, and you just stare at the page. Well, you don't just start like putting marks on the page. You've got to ask questions. What did I do this summer? Well, a lot of stuff.
What was newsworthy about what you did this summer?
You got out of school May 24th. What happened the 25th? And just start asking questions so you actually figure out what were the highlights of the summer, and you can go.
And then it becomes, instead of what did I do last summer, why I hate my little brother.
Which makes an interesting paper.
Which would be much more fun to read. But if you start the topic, well, actually, I could have had a lot of fun this summer, but I got stuck home taking my little brother, and I had to take him everywhere. And suddenly you got 5 entertaining little episodes to write in a story. So what I did this summer is I had a miserable summer because of my little brother.
Karl will be horrified by this, but I was a D student.
So you get inspired, and then the writing's actually fun.
I would have an essay assigned to me, and I would write whatever I wanted to write, and then finish it up with something that tied it back. And that's what I did this summer. So it might have been a complete falsehood. I might have talked about Christmas.
You would have written about why it was a mistake to go off the gold standard.
And that's what I did this summer.
Honestly, when it was my job to grade papers, if somebody did that, and it was interesting, I was very happy.
The teachers don't care.
You had to give them a topic because most of the students didn't have any idea what to write, so you'd have to give them a topic just to get something out of them. I would do better as a teacher now, I think, having encountered Malachy's prompts. I would say I would know better how to teach them to write a paper. I mean, I kind of did that. I would say when you take notes in class, as we're going through class, and you should take notes, which kids don't often do these days, by the way. The way I would do it, whenever I was in class and something bothered me, I'd put my little bracket on the right-hand side and I'd write, this really bothers me. This is a load of crap. I would write my own commentary on the class while I was in the class. And then when it came time to write, I'd just look at all my brackets. The thing was already written. I'd already thought out all my interesting stuff and I could just collect them. I didn't do it according to all of these. Yeah, all the things that bugged me. Things that bug you make for good papers. I mean, the questions. What I was doing was this method, pretty much, except not quite this method. But just questioning the class, questioning the text. So when you sit down to write, what are the questions I'm answering? What does my audience care about? What do they need to know? All of the prompts in here are very useful.
Yeah, and to me, the worst paper is when you were asked to write a paper on a Shakespeare sonnet, as opposed to tell me how this sonnet changes your idea of love or not.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, internalize it and say, I think this is craziness, or it absolutely captures something that's true to me. But unless you make that personal, this whole idea of being objective, it often drives me a little crazy with some great books that say, well, we're not here to hear personal stories. Well, I love nothing more than when people connect something in the text to something in their life.
Yeah. I took over for a professor who got sick. He's since passed away. He was a good friend. But I had to take over his class in the middle of it. And he had this assignment that he gave his students, which was something like this. It was, for your final philosophy paper, go walk through a graveyard. Stay there for an hour. Now write your paper about what thoughts came to mind. They were so interesting. It was such good papers. I got out of that business shortly after. I was going to steal that idea, which is probably part of the reason for the love of Aristotle versus Plato, because Socrates is going to take you up into abstract realms. You can get lost up there, and Aristotle's going to say who, what, when, where, why, and how, and get you back to, well, I was walking through the cemetery and I saw, all these people that died within 3 years of being born, and it made me think about the shortness of life. You get into the particular rather than, it seems that there are forms, and the particular, you're writing for particular people,
right?
Like Meno wanted to do particular things, and Socrates says, let's talk abstract,
and that's annoying, but sometimes necessary.
Yes.
Yeah, it's super necessary.
And you can understand people getting angry at the metaphysics their first time through it. I mean, to think of when people read Herodotus the first time, oh, these digressions, I lose it. And they're still like in high school history mode, like they were supposed to memorize all the names and dates or something until they realize it's freaking impossible. And they should just give up on the whole thing and just read their way through and enjoy it. But you then end up Herodotus being your favorite historian because of his digressions.
Yep.
Yeah, all those people that get drunk before they decide. I love it.
Yeah, would you rather go out drinking with Herodotus or Thucydides?
Thucydides is such a liar. He's like, this is what Perseus said. Quote, 51 pages. No, it's not 51 pages. But
I have a big question for you guys. Last night we were doing the symposium, and of course Alcibiades comes in with my favorite opening line, which is apparently he's really drunk. So it sits next to you and he goes, hi. All of us have experienced that, and some of us have been that person occasionally. Hi. I just came in from another party. But Alcibiades as a character is amazing. In Plutarch and in Thucydides, I mean, what should he do? He sleeps with the king of Sparta's wife, right? Do they have a kid, I think? It's like, he's absolutely a madman. He dresses in Who would you cast as Alcibiades? And why hasn't there been a movie about him? He's got to be one of the most interesting people who ever lived.
I believe the kids today would call him a Chad.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, have you seen the, oh my gosh, Leonardo DiCaprio movie about the Frank Abagnale, Catch Me If You Can?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, he's just like this con man that would just, he would, he would pose as an airline captain and then a surgeon.
Yeah, he might be good.
I mean, Alcibiades is almost as outrageous as that, maybe more outrageous than that.
Maybe
Frank
more.
Abagnale.
I mean, the whole the being bisexual, the whole deal of him is, I find him amazing and surprised maybe there are stories or opera or something written about him. But to me, he's sort of the first anti-hero.
Well, there's a good script waiting to be written.
Trump.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that'd make a good book or movie.
It would.
He's a scoundrel.
Well, if the Athenians were going to call you back to put you on trial and kill you, would you go?
Probably not. Socrates would.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Crito is might be an answer to Alcibiades.
So did you get the pun on my cover?
Uh-oh. I hope so.
Dinner.
The last word that of his scribbling is dinner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get the
because
pun.
that's what he thinks he should have free instead of being sentenced to death.
Oh, yes, I get it. Should be given free dinners.
Yeah.
So I've got two of the online Great Books seminar hosts here with me. I have a number of people that hate all the Aristophanes that we read.
Yeah.
Convince me.
We read one book.
We read
We have one
of his plays.
We read 3 plays, right?
Yeah.
So
one seminar.
Convince me to keep all those dick jokes. Because he's at the symposium. That's why I remembered this.
Okay, so it's very important to be able to make fun of stuff. I think it's characteristic of this strand of Western culture that we make fun of stuff. And this is the first best examples we have of it. That it is publicly funded and makes fun of all the politicians is fascinating. Yeah, I like it. I mean, I was telling you, Scott, yesterday, I think, I love the Acharnians. I love that the guy gets mad and he sets up his own country, wants to do deals with other countries. And
a separate piece, yeah.
What do they say? If you want to know what a people worships, find the thing that you're not allowed to make fun of. And I think being able to make fun or seeing Athenians making fun of themselves is important, and maybe a model. Like if I couldn't make fun of the president or the Congress, that would be a problem, wouldn't it?
Well, and I also thought in the Arcadians particularly, I have to admit, I thought of you, Scott, as when I was trying to think who I would cast as the character. I mean, he sees all the BS around him. Yet at the same time, he's still scheming. He still bought his own farm, And then, when he goes to Euripides' house, right, it's just like, in fact, that inspired Tom Hall. We've all watched those. Do you remember those Bo Peep commercials? But wait, there's more.
Right.
That line, I actually know the guy, Tom Hall, who's older than me, wrote that line. And it came to him from Aristophanes when he's going to Euripides' house and he's always asking for one more thing.
But wait.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, and I like them making fun of Socrates. I don't think it's necessarily fair, but it's kind of the perception. He's this guy that putters around and talks about stupid and teaches you to tell lies good. That's a perception that you might have of Socrates. I guess it's a reasonable one to have, At the end, what is the point of all of this stuff? And all that guy wants to do is be able to discharge his debts. Which, it's like when Aristotle talks about the form of the good, and, what good is this for a farmer? So just the poking fun at the very important or very esteemed, it's revelatory. If they can withstand it, that's great. And even if they do, I mean, making fun of Euripides with all the costumes and stuff that he has for his tragedy. It's
the mission of the comedian. And it tells you the danger of political correctness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's clearly making ethnic fun in the Acarnanians, right? I think a lot of times when the Acarnanians is done, they have Southern accents or Scottish accents. If it's done, or Irish accents, it's like, oh, here's some rube. Who thinks he was trying to market his daughters as piglets. I mean, it really is quite funny when you think about it. So what's not to like?
Yeah, I mean, Aristophanes himself speaks in one of the plays about, and I don't have the quote because I was not prepared for this, Scott, where he talks about the job of the comedian is he thinks he's a revealer of truth. through his comic arts.
And does he do that about his bit on airline food, or no? You got to make fun of important things.
Yeah, or he usually does something on food in the Arcadius. And then the Lysistrata is an amazing play.
The Lysistrata is an amazing play. I would kind of like to get the Assembly Women in there.
Yeah.
Every month I have a bunch of people say, why are we reading this? Just doo-doo jokes. But I'm more inclined to add the Assembly Women than to get rid of any of it, actually.
I like that it's, Lysistrata is this play about the problem that the women are having. It's kind of like Medea made political. If the play were done now, in the current age, the women would take over and it would be utopia. It'd be heavenly Jerusalem. It'd be shining city on a hill. No, the women take over and it's still a mess because they want to go home. And the lady's like, I got to go home. I'm pregnant. No, you're not. That's just a bowl you've stuck in your... No, I'm pregnant. But you weren't pregnant yesterday. Well, I am now. Because the women don't want to be away from their men either. That's good comedy. It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, you would have never had Second City without Aristophanes.
And it's an invention, too. Comedy had to be invented.
Yeah, I think I need to add the Assembly Women. When's the last time you guys read that? That's, though. I
don't know that I ever read it.
I'm not sure I have.
Ooh. So the women take over the assembly. So some of them, some of them translated women in power, women in parliament, the Congress women. A lot goes on, of course, but one of these older women eventually legislate that the attractive young men have to have sex with them first. They've got, so I'll make everybody mad. Like so much of feminism.
I think you're just wanting to get yourself in trouble.
I don't care.
Scott.
Yeah, but it's just so true. So much of all of what I see now is just like, haggard chicks trying to explain how they're actually attractive and desirable. And I just read the Assembly Women and I'm like, yeah, there we go again. Here it is.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Beautiful at any size. We're going to legislate that they get the bone first.
Goodness.
The Assembly Women has already covered it. It's awesome.
Yeah, you could probably add it. We have to buy another book, though.
It might be worth it. Praxagora. She's like, all you young men come over here. Well, what else do we need to talk about?
Let me check my notes. I think chapter 5, I think that's good homework for everybody. The tropes and schemes really, I just reemphasize that. I mean, you say I'm on 169, start with a regular sentence, rework it according to tropes and schemes. You're sitting around rather than sitting watching Netflix, or even while you're doing it. You just sit there with a pad of paper and there's a sentence, and then let me rewrite that. Let me use this figure. Let me make it a chiasm. Let me do some parallelism and build up those writing muscles. And then when you have to write something, it'll be easier for you.
And let me correct sometimes a misperception. Again, in the symposium, remember after Agathon speaks, and he was clearly a speechifier, right? Full of pretty phrases but kind of actually the weakest speech on the meaning of love. He said, well, not a lot of pretty words, not a lot of truth there. So one reason that classical rhetoric went out of fashion was a feeling that you were just prettying up the words. I found quite the opposite, that when you actually take a sentence you've written and try and put it in one of these orders, you suddenly find that you've not only tightened the words, but you've tightened the logic. Or you've now been forced to draw a contrast to the point you were making for balance. So to me, it's not just a matter of making it prettier or more memorable, but if you're doing it right, it'll actually help clarify the thought of people. But you can take it too far, where you become sort of a Jesse Jackson parody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you say that in the book. Save it for the big moments.
Yeah.
Going to that practice idea, there are fundamentals of writing, and Malachy says it's this question asking, and then knowing your tropes and schemes, and etc. In Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, he talks about reading newspaper articles as a young man, and then he would rewrite the articles in his own words, and then have friends read that article, read his version, and read the other one, and compare and contrast them, and give him feedback. He constantly practiced before he became a printer and a newspaper man. Even if you're going to write very, very simply without many tropes or schemes, and you're going to be Hemingway, that takes an enormous amount of practice and self-awareness to be able to do that. You don't just because we can speak extemporaneously doesn't mean we can write well. It takes practice.
But it's a hopeful thing. So if you don't know all of the stuff behind good writing, it seems like a mystical art to you.
Yes. Or it's a gift. Some people, can play the piano and some people can't. My point is that's BS. Everybody can write well, as long as they're using writing to fit their lives and do what they want. I always thought essays were like the dumbest invention ever. Like, who are they for? What is write a newspaper opinion. I understand that. Write a movie review. I can do that, but these kind of abstract, and then how they're evaluated. This whole, I think the standardized test used this test on writing something like a 5-paragraph essay. It's like, where did they come up with that idea?
And how do you evaluate it?
Yes, how do you evaluate? It's like so stupid. I don't get a lot of what writing is for. And I do kind of like, writing is therapy. This whole idea, the self-expressive, we'll just sit down and write. That's okay. There's a book called The Artist Way, where the author encourages everybody to keep a journal and just to write morning pages. Just write 3 pages of whatever runs in. Don't worry about grammar or anything. And I think it's a good idea. My only problem is without prompts, you start ending up writing your daily list of things to do. And so I think it's always good to start with questions. I try in talking about formats again, like the Jesuits have Ignatius has this thing. And I think it goes back a bit to Marcus Aurelius, the Examen, to ask yourself, where did I find God today? What would I have done differently than yesterday? Just answering that question in the morning and make yourself right. Did I see anything beautiful yesterday? Those are just wonderful questions and prompts to write 3 pages on. And it's like doing lifting for your mind. When, Scott, you were talking about practice, I think you should do, like people should do 30 minutes of exercise every day. Using words on paper is a way, calisthenics or lifting for your mind, I think.
So go to onlinegreatbooks.com and click on shop, and you can get a copy of this thing. You can get it at Amazon too, but it's helpful to us if you go there to Online Great Books and buy it. And when are you going to do another Socratic Scribbling course, by the way? We haven't set another date.
October, we think.
Okay.
We'll try and do it twice a year if we can, I think.
Yeah, so if you're a member.
And it's like 6 weeks. We try and do 6 Sundays. There's usually one holiday in there somehow, where we do 1 chapter of the book each time. So it's not overly straining. And it's the only writing course that you'll ever take where you don't have to write.
Yeah, right. And there's no grade. There's no grade. You just do it.
And that will improve your writing. It's like classic ad guys, impossible problem. Improve your writing without putting a pen to page.
I think if you go through it, you're going to look for occasions to write more often, which will probably help your job and your relationships.
Have you noticed how many of our people have blogs?
A few?
Yeah.
Quite a few, and they post links to things that they've written. They write a lot of stuff about what they've read with us and so on. And I think that's some of Malachy's doing. You can also look for Malachy's work. He's been publishing quite a bit of stuff on Medium. You can go look up Malachy, Malachy Walsh, Walsh,
or Socratic Scribbler.
Oh,
I think it'll be branded under that.
And go see some more about him writing about his methods. And next week, Karl and I are going to talk about Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express.
I know who did it.
You do?
Yeah.
I finished it. I didn't know until I finished it. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about what? Greater and Lesser Hippias.
Is that a problem in large dogs?
Yes. No, cows. No, is it hippie? What's
hip dysplasia?
Oh,
I don't know. I'm sorry. That was a very bad joke. These are dialogues from Plato that we'll be reading.
That's right. And then we'll cover a couple of essays, maybe, or a couple of works from some management journals on this Delphi method. I think we need to read some Walter Lippmann too, Malachy.
Yes, he's not bad.
Manufacturing Consent. Isn't that him?
So what would put your Delphi group, and I've actually worked with what's his name, Goldberg. There's hypnosis focus groups where we hypnotize all the participants and then ask them about their use of products and services.
Wow. That sounds evil.
Hal Goldberg. Google it. Hal Goldberg hypnosis. It's fascinating. He's actually a great guy. I've worked with him a number of times.
That sounds pretty gross.
I think we should do like a hypnosis OGB group of some kind where we all come on hypnotize.
You're in charge of that.
And say, what do you think? What you really want to do? I'm not a good hypnotist. Who's the most hypnotic? Karl could probably do it.
No,
Karl looks like a
mesmerist.
Drake. Yes,
mesmerist.
You
do. It's the beard.
Yes, you do.
Need to make it pointier.
Yeah,
and then curl it.
Well, thank you all so very much for listening. Thank you, Malachy, for coming on here and talking about this.
Thank you. What's more fun than this?
Yeah, it's the best job. It's the best job.
And also, that should be the point, is that the writing should be fun. Why do anything that's not fun if you don't have to?
I agree.
I try not to.
There we have it. We'll talk to you guys in 2 weeks.